Welcome to the Krusty Fox, and today we're having a menage a trois with Season 1, Episode 8 of Sex and the City, entitled Three's a Crowd. But before that, last time I asked you whether you found Miranda's jealous treatment of Skipper fine or problematic. Excellently named commenter Tallulah Lagash cut right to the heart of the issue by recommending that someone put Skipper on a register. Who knows, maybe his disappearance from the series with barely a mention is down to him legally having to stay 100 yards away from the other characters at all times. Carrie opens this episode with a fairy tale analogy. Once upon a time, she says, Charlotte fell in love. The once in that sentence is delivered without irony, but you and I both know that Charlotte falls in love as frequently as Todrick Hall's publicist has to delete his tweets. Miss York has been following a guy from party to party, which sounds less to me like Snow White and more like single white female. In any case, it works, and she bags herself a new man, Jack, who looks like just the kind of inbred neoconservative she'd love to take home for the holidays. After having an apparently amazing roll in the hay, Jack asks Charlotte what her fantasies are. Turns out she doesn't really have any, and worryingly the first place her mind goes in search of an answer is to do it in her parents' bed. For those counting, that's 2 episodes out of the last 3 where her daddy issues have threatened to burst out of her like a baby xenomorph. Jack's own fantasy though is locked and loaded, having another woman join them in bed. At lunch, she tells Carrie, Samantha and Miranda about Jack's indecent proposal. Miranda wearily proclaims that all men want the same thing, though does admit that she may have once done it herself after getting drunk in college and waking up in someone else's bra. Samantha doesn't have time to dwell on the possible crime her friend just detailed because this is her time to shine. Given how repressed Charlotte is most of the time, being able to encourage her to be even the tiniest bit adventurous must be like finding a rare gem. A boring one, but rare all the same. Delivering her sage wisdom like she's the Dalai Lama of doing it, Samantha explains that the other woman should be a stranger to avoid any drama. Charlotte makes it clear that she'd rather have a friend join her. Her first thought is Carrie, who is absolutely the last person you want anywhere near your love life unless your kink is chaos. Carrie in turn suggests Samantha. Nobody suggests Miranda because nothing ruins your buzz like seeing a friend twist off your boyfriend's head before you've even had a chance to dim the lights. Carrie decides to turn this into her next column, pondering whether threesomes are the new sexual frontier. She claims that men are obsessed with them, and the fact that things can come in threes is somehow proof of this. It's like watching the number 23, but somehow even more insane. While Carrie's making connections in threes, Samantha's across town concentrating on making just the one. She's been seeing married wine importer Ken, whose wife, Carrie snarkily tells us, designs modular office furniture. Apparently, being gainfully employed means you deserve to be cheated on. Later on, Charlotte dreams that she and Jack hit a bar and pick up a new friend for the bedroom. When she wakes up, we're told that this is the most excited she's been since high school. A damning indictment of her life so far, if ever I heard one. The next day, we find out that Miranda was more affected by being left off the list of Charlotte's potential additions than anybody realised. Dressed like an extra from Bugsy Malone, she moans to her therapist that their implied rejection has given her literal nightmares. There's no reason to expect this, but Miranda's moment of self-reflection fails to help her realise that if not being invited causes this much of a spiral, actually being invited would probably cause her to run through Times Square naked with a bunch of knives. At Big's apartment, Carrie makes the bold claim that they might be the only couple in Manhattan not advertising a part-time position in their relationship. This, it's worth remembering, is the same Big who Carrie had to force not to date other women at the same time as her in literally the last episode. As she helps Big choose a tie, Carrie wonders why it's almost sexier to put a tie on a man than to take it off him. My guess? It's her long-suppressed survival instincts kicking in and telling her to strangle him with it. When the talk turns to threesomes, she's horrified to hear Big say that he had one with an ex-wife she was previously unaware of. If Carrie can't deal with the idea that someone else touched her boyfriend before she met him, she's going to lose her mind when she finds out what happens at his proctology appointments. At a cosmetics store, Carrie tells her tale of woe to Samantha and Miranda. Inadvertently, Samantha confirms Carrie's worst fears by telling her that lover Ken's affair is down to his marital relations having become stale and boring. Carrie thinks this is what's happening to her and Big, for no good reason, it's worth pointing out, as they've gone from wild to sweet. Miranda, sensing another opportunity for an invite, tries on a new shade of lipstick and attempts to seduce Carrie. It's unsuccessful, but those of you who have watched And Just Like That know that while it takes her a couple of decades, she does eventually get her own back for this rejection in Carrie's kitchen. Her friends advise her that the best thing to do would be to check out Big's ex, in possibly the single worst piece of advice given in the entire series. Seizing permission to do something utterly crazy, Carrie turns up at the publisher ex-wife Barbara's office. Carrie is, of course, very upset to find that she isn't a haggard troll. The Bradshaw look proves about as potent as usual when her cover story, pitching a steamy romance novel, is blown apart by the revelation that Barbara is a children's publisher. As a journalist, you'd expect her brain to leap into action and whip up a brilliant new plot outline. Instead, career writer Carrie Bradshaw tries to sell a children's book about a little girl with magic cigarettes which transport her to New Jersey. Barbara mystifyingly loves the idea of an adult children's book. It's just as well Carrie couldn't pull something real together, because letting her tell stories to kids would be like letting John Wayne Gacy host an episode of Blue's Clues. Elsewhere, Samantha's trip to a flower shop is ruined by a chance encounter with Ken and his long-suffering wife Ruth. Ken manages to give the game away in under 20 seconds without actually saying a word. He practically drags away poor Ruth, who obviously knows exactly what her Zeta male husband has been up to. Miranda heads back to therapy, this time dressed like her next appointment is an audition for Newsies. With that fresh in your minds, it's perhaps unsurprising that her hypothetical proposition to be a third for her therapist goes unresponded to. As a slight aside, it's at times like these where what for a decent stretch of time was considered a pioneering show really lets its leading ladies down. There are airshow accidents with less intense spirals than these people nosedive into over the pettiest issues. You're left wondering whether what was pioneering about this show in the 90s was more that four women were talking explicitly about sex, and less what they were actually saying about it. After a night of imagining Barbara in bed with her and Big that to any level-headed person would be a wake-up call, Carrie instead joins her for lunch to discuss her fake book because she's a sociopath. Surprise, surprise, the publisher passed on Carrie's magical chain-smoking child. Another opportunity for an exit that she ignores because there's intel to be extracted. Over Chardonnay, she feigns ignorance of Barbara's history to discover that her marriage to Big failed because he slept with her best friend. You just know in that moment Samantha's face flashed across Carrie's mind. Speaking of, Samantha receives a call from Ken to tell her that he ended his marriage to be with her, and a simultaneous call from poor Ruth offering to join them in bed in order to save her marriage. Unwilling to play the Angelina to Ruth's Jennifer, she hangs up on them both in a demonstration of what normal people do when situations get too messy, which I wish Carrie had been there to see. That night, Charlotte and Jack attend a masquerade ball in what looks like a two-bed apartment. They wind up in a spare bedroom and a woman they spotted earlier joins them. Because Charlotte isn't immediately made the filling in a Jack Stranger sandwich, and admittedly also gets kicked onto the floor, she storms out probably more certain than ever that sex should be done in the dark and only on the 29th of February. While Charlotte's getting kicked out of one stranger's bed, Miranda's self-confidence crisis has her trying to climb into another's. She answers an ad from a couple looking for a third and meets them at a bar. After confirming that at least one couple in Manhattan wants her, she dives out of the nearest fire exit and leaves them hanging. Classy move, Miranda. After 8 days, Carrie finally meets up with Big, who confronts her about being distant. In a voice that tells you that she considers herself the victim here, she explains that it was because he didn't give her an excruciatingly detailed account of his romantic history before daring to let her become obsessed with him. This time, however, Big came prepared. He's well aware that Carrie's been meeting up with Barbara and of what she's discovered about his cheating. Instead of being humbled, Carrie's instead annoyed that Big didn't tell her that he knew, because nothing will ever please her when she's off the deep end. Don't get me wrong, Big's going to prove time and time again how terrible a boyfriend and person he is, but you've got to give him some credit for how calmly he handles this particular situation. He explains that opening up their love life was how he and Barbara worked towards realizing that they didn't want to be together anymore. The implication being that not asking for that with Carrie means that their love life isn't unsatisfying. Having received yet another nugget of validation, Carrie's rage is immediately diffused and she returns to factory settings like a malfunctioning Furby. Convenient? Yes, but the writers needed to wrap things up within the runtime, and so sometimes there just isn't time for a proper conclusion. So that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like, subscribe for more of the same, and turn on notifications so you know when I upload. And if you can, please share these videos so that even more people can stand in judgment with us. And if you're still with me, congratulations, your prize is this week's question. If, like Carrie, you thought you'd never get caught, would you go as far as she did to dig up dirt on a new partner? Answers in the comments, and my favourite will show up in next week's video. Thanks for watching, and as ever, if you can't be good, be crusty.